Wife's the singer. I'm just the loud one, okay? Left is always right, and right is always wrong, so you must learn to drive upon the left. If you drive on the right, you'll probably lose your life, so drive upon the left and not the right. Do left if you want to live, do left, or your life you'll give. Do left if you want to stay alive. Do left, or you're on your own. Do left, or no car you'll own. Do left, or you'll see God's throne. Do left, do left. Anyway. It's a little bit goofy, but it did help us to stay on the left, so anyway. And I think my wife mentioned to the kids we did a new version of I May Never March in the Infantry. Did the kids get some of that this morning? Do you remember what she told you? Should I have you all come up here and stand up here and sing it with me? We can do it. You guys want to come up? Why not? Come on up. Any of the kids that were in there with my wife today? I'll leave the mic. Come on up. You'll be fine. Oh, do we have shy ones here? Should we just all do it where you're at in your seats already? Come on up. You guys can do it. Come on. We'll have you brave guys. Come on. All right, here's another one. Good job. So the things my wife taught them today was, I may never paddle in a waka. That's the canoe that we have back on our table, okay? We didn't bring our big display because our display's built in 1999, and it's a big wooden display, and it's not good for flying. But anyway, I may never paddle in a waka, eat a kumara, which is like a big sweet potato, and some of them are bright purple. And I mean, not just purple on the outside, purple all the way through. And so I may never paddle in a waka, eat a kumara, jump in the haka. Now, does anybody know what the haka is? If you've ever seen a rugby game from New Zealand, it's kind of a war chant thing they do. And they always end it by jumping and sticking out their tongue and making their eyes really wild. Okay? Can you guys do that? Okay, good. All right. And then they also, and the last one is, or hunt a great moa. Now, the moas were big birds like an ostrich, except they were bigger than ostriches, and they were flightless, and they were basically hunted by the Maori for food. So I may never paddle in a waka, eat a kumara, jump in the haka. I may never hunt a great moa, but I'm in the Lord's army, ka pai. Ka pai means very good, okay? So, you guys ready? Me. Yeah. I may never paddle in a waka, eat a kumara, jump in the haka. I may never hunt a great moa, but I'm in the Lord's army, ka pai. I'm in the Lord's army, ka pai. I'm in the Lord's army, ka pai. I may never paddle in a waka, eat a kumara, jump in the haka. I may never hunt a great moa, but I'm in the Lord's army, ka pai. Good job. So, you might have figured it out. We enjoy ministry. We enjoy serving the Lord, and we enjoy being with people. Sorry, I don't enjoy these things, okay? But we are so thankful that God's been able to use us, and as I said this morning, we're not anybody special. We're just really simple farm kids that grew up on a farm and just said, Lord, here's our lives. Take us and use us however you want. And it can be anybody, anywhere. As I said, my wife grew up in a really tiny little church before she went to high school at the church we met at. And from that, several missionaries have come out. And our home church in Michigan, Prairie Baptist Church. Our pastor's been there for 42 years now, and there have been about 100 young people that have gone into full-time ministry through that ministry. And again, it's not a big city ministry with thousands of people. It is just a small town with faithful people. And really, that's what God calls us to, is faithfulness. Amen. So I wanted to open it up a little bit to questions. If anybody has any questions tonight, and I'll use my watch because honestly, the reflection of the lights in the clock up there, I will be done at 8 o'clock or something because I can't see. Any questions? Any questions tonight about the ministry, what we're doing, what our plans are? Any thoughts? Questions? Or am I just so good that I told you everything? Or my wife did in her testimony this morning. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I was curious about the animal life. Is there any dangerous animals?
There are no dangerous animals on land. There are sharks in the ocean, and there are great white sharks in the ocean. And Marco sharks, or what we would call here mako sharks. And so they could be a little problem if you're out in the ocean. But on land, there's no dangerous animals. But there are people who die in New Zealand every year in the bush because it looks so beautiful and so wonderful, and I'm going to go take a hike. Like the mountain near us looks like Mount Fuji. It's a beautiful mountain. You can hike to the top. Now, I hiked up there a few years ago, about 4 years ago. And from the ski field car park, you gain about 1,800 feet of elevation to get to the top. And it takes about 4.5 hours to get up to it. And the last hour and a half is literally with your hands holding onto the rocks as you climb up. It's quite steep. So, but that mountain, though it looks so beautiful, that there's been quite a few people who have died on that mountain because they underestimate the change of weather. And all of a sudden the cloud comes in, they can't find their way down, they fall off a cliff, they freeze to death because they didn't take proper gear. And it happens in New Zealand bush all the time. There's tourists that come and die because they don't take proper preparations. But animal-wise, no. And if any of you guys like to hunt, there's no hunting seasons there. You probably saw a photo of me with my grandson. I was holding a kangaroo, if you wondered what that was. A small kangaroo called a wallaby. So they only get about this tall. And any mammals in New Zealand are introduced species. So they're considered pests. So you can shoot them any time of year. There's no seasons, no limits. There's 8 different types of deer there, and rabbits and goats and wallabies and a bunch of different things. So yeah, and we eat them all. Anything we shoot, we eat. So yes.
You mentioned this morning that the president or prime minister said there's no official religion.
Uh-huh.
What would be the biggest, or what are some of the more challenging when you're witnessing what religious perspective or framework do you run into? Animism? Is it Catholicism, Muslim?
Probably the biggest one right now. Well, there is quite a few Muslims that have come into the country as well. And there are various religions from around the world. So you will face those a little bit. But really the biggest thing is the humanism that's so prevalent. And basically the idea that I don't need God. I don't need a savior. You just are talking to some make-believe guy in the sky. And that's one of the biggest things. But what we found is the best way we found for people to be reached is literally getting to know them and then building that relationship and then talking to the Lord, talking to them about what the Lord's doing in your life, and then they will trust you. One of the problems is we have quite a bit of Mormon influence in the city of Hamilton. They have a temple, a large temple there. And when we lived in Hamilton, because of our accents, people automatically thought we were Mormons. Not because I wear around a name tag. No. I only wear this to church on Sundays when people don't know me. But because we had accents and American accents, people thought we were Mormons because there were about 30,000 Mormons in that city. So it's quite a big training area for the South Pacific. But that was only pretty much Hamilton where that was an issue. But another thing is the Maori religion, because there's been a big push now for, and it's happening around the world too, not just in New Zealand, with the idea that these First Nation peoples and the push toward them becoming in control of everything. And with that comes the Spiritism. And so some of you may have seen, Disney came out with a movie a few years ago called, what was it called? Maui? Moana, yeah. Maui was the guy on it. Anyway, that holds heaps of New Zealand Spiritism that's part of the Pacific Island sort of culture and all. And if you've been in New Zealand and you know about the Maoris, a lot of that was incorporated into that movie, because it's all about ancestor worship and worshiping the stars and the ancestors dying and becoming stars, looking down on us and all this stuff. And it's not good. And there's also the big push, the idea of that everything was wonderful before missionaries came to New Zealand, because the Maoris were all fine before the white people came and messed them all up. Now that's going on around the world too, like in Australia with the Voice and the Aborigines, and also in other countries. And the reality is, until Christ comes to an area, it really is chaos. That's what really happens. And the idea that everything was wonderful before Christianity came is wrong. It's totally wrong. Because before that, people were, it doesn't matter what country my family's originally on my mom's side from Norway. And I mean, let's face it, the Vikings weren't the nicest people in the world. They killed people and stole their stuff and all that, and that happened all around the world. But when Christ comes and changes people, then you love your enemies. Then you care for the needy, and you take care of one another. And that's what changes people when Christ comes into life. And so today, there are many people trying to go back to, it was much better before any of the white man's religion. Was Jesus white? He wasn't. It's always crazy when they say that. But anyway, so that's a big part of the problem, the Spiritism and stuff that goes on. Any others? Another question? Good questions. What does my wife do? Most of the work. Yeah, she really does, because I am not a detail person. Okay, I'm kind of like an ideas person. We'll sit down, and this is one of the things we do with the pastors. When we have family camp and stuff, we'll have a meeting with the pastors, and we'll look at the year calendar from all of our different churches. So we try not to schedule things that will conflict with other churches, so we can go to their church and be involved in their special meetings, or go to this event or that event, and that builds us all much closer. So it's really good. But I will get the ideas and come up with a lot of stuff, and my wife will say, we have that next Tuesday, that thing you planned 6 months ago, and you haven't looked at again. Oh yeah, that's me. Yes, okay. Yeah, so anyway, she's very good at that. But yes.
What type of industry, or what is the driving force for the economy there in New Zealand?
Okay, our big industry, we have basically three. It's the farming industry, which is dairy, beef, and sheep. Those are big industries. We produce food for about 40 million people, but we only have 5 million in the country. And in our government, in their wisdom to save the world, has decided that we need to reduce our animal stocks by about 20% by 2030, because our animals have too much gas, and they are producing methane that's going to destroy the world. So they've told our farmers 20% reduction by 2030. So that's crazy, because that reduces the food, okay? And then another big industry is forestry, because trees grow really fast there because of warm enough temperatures and lots of rain. So the trees grow well. We have shipload after shipload of trees going to China. And then tourism. A lot of people come there, and tourism, which was really crippled during the whole COVID thing. That a lot of people lost their jobs through that. But that's the main industries. Any further questions? Yes?
On the video, you're asking people to come and serve. What's the greatest thing that your training has to meet as far as people personnel, youth pastors, or like what are you petitioning God to bring in that you see
Mm-hmm.
we need in terms of workers and positions?
We need people to come and help start more churches because there's still towns and cities of 20, 30,000 that have no churches. And most of our churches, we really don't have to worry about people church hopping. You know, have you heard of that before? Where people got to go from one church to another church to another. And, you know, that can create problems for both churches, really. It can be, depending on what's going on. But we don't have that problem because most of our churches are at least 2 hours away from the next church. So, yeah, if you church hop and you got to drive 2 hours to church Sunday morning, it's a bit inconvenient. So we need people to help start churches. Now, they don't necessarily have to do all the work themselves. They can come and work with someone and help them. That's what our goal was to do, is to go and help Pastor Bob McLean to have a church planting ministry. But then he left after about 5 years, and we didn't know if he was coming back. And this other young man came, and he wanted to work with us, and he's been with us now for about 8 years. And it's been so good because with them there, as there's a problem in another church, someone's sick, a pastor's sick, doesn't have someone to fill in the pulpit, one of us can go and preach and fill in for them. Or as when our grandson was sick, our coworkers could carry on the ministry seamlessly. And as we go on furloughs, same thing. We're on furlough now. They're carrying on the ministry, training people for future ministry. When they go on furlough, we'll just carry on as normal. So it's been really, really good to do it that way. Team ministries, I think, are really good because I've seen too many that kind of fall apart when it's just one guy there. So, yes, ma'am.
Since the Prime Minister has taken the position that she has, how much government interference do you propose?
Right now, we still have freedom to preach and stuff, though we are limited by some of the new laws that have come in. Like they passed recently an anti-conversion therapy law, which was talking about the homosexual, transgenderism, all that stuff. And they made it illegal to talk to someone about that if your intent is to change them from what they're wanting to do in that scope of lifestyle. And so you can get 5 years in prison for just talking to someone about that. And even if they give you permission to talk to them about that, you can still be charged and go to prison because them giving you consent to talk to them about it still does not free you from the law. So they basically said total censorship. You cannot talk about those things and try to get people away from that. And part of that is also you cannot pray with them. Believe it or not, they put the word pray in the legislation. So it was definitely targeted toward Christianity. They said when they were making the law, the ministers of parliament, one of them stood up and said that the Maori people had their sexuality, which they said was very free, they said it was stolen by the missionaries that came. That was their mindset. So, as I said, there's lots of evil with governmental things, and that lady is no longer prime minister. She quit in January. The election is in October, and it wasn't looking good for her party, so she resigned, and she now works for someone, Prince William, in some Save the World program in England or whatever. And anyway, and hopefully the next government will be slightly better, but none of the parties are very conservative, so it's going to be still a problem. But I better quit taking questions because I haven't even thought about preaching yet, and it's already after 7. So I hope you don't mind staying a while. We're usually not done till about 8 o'clock in our church. So no, only joking. We're actually done an hour ago because we started 5. So we usually finish about 6:30. Anyway, if you'll take your Bibles, please, and turn to Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12. And I won't take a long time. And there's a main thought I want you to consider, and that is, where is your treasure? Where is your treasure? Luke chapter 12 and verse number 16. We'll begin reading there. Luke 12:16. And he spake a parable unto them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do? Because I have no room where to bestow my fruits. And he said, This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. You know, I don't think it's wrong to prepare for the future. Don't get me wrong here. I don't think it's wrong to prepare financially for your families and to prepare for your children, for their education, and prepare for potentially evil days that we may face. Now, we've been pretty fortunate in America that we've not seen widespread, severe persecution. But many places around the world, people have. And you know, we live in kind of an area in America where people are like, yeah, being a Christian's pretty easy. It's not hard to be a Christian. People are not hunting us down to kill us because we're Christians. People are not torturing us because we're Christians. But folks, realize even now at this time, people around the world are facing that. And there are many who are dying for their faith even today. And we in America are not necessarily exempt from that happening here too. So we need to realize in the future, we don't know what's going to take place and we need to be ready. So there's nothing wrong with preparing for the future and being wise. But are we only worried about the treasures on this earth? Or are we considering the treasures that we lay up in heaven? And folks, those treasures in heaven, the only things we can take with us are the people that come to know the Lord. That's it. That's the treasure. And yes, we need to live. I mean, it takes money to live in this world. That's part of it. But do you live for money, or do you live for eternity and you use money to help you as you reach people for the Lord? When I was a Christian, a new Christian, and I met my wife's family, I thought they were kind of weird, okay? Now, I say that because I didn't really know much about going to church and all that stuff. But when I met her family, they were like at church all the time. They were like there Sunday school, Sunday morning, Sunday night. He was there for deacons meetings. They were there for Monday night visitation. They were there for Wednesday service. They were there for special meetings. And I'm like, you know, they must be pretty wicked people to have to be in church that much to confess all that stuff, you know? But the reality was, they were actually just faithful Christians. But I didn't know that because I hadn't been around it before, and I'd heard about people going to church and stuff, but pretty much I only knew of people kind of going on a Sunday morning. And I didn't realize there were actually people who were really, really faithful to God. And so I saw that and I thought, wow. And as I kind of liked this beautiful young woman, anyway, by the way, I proposed to her and she rejected me. Now, how do you think about that, guys? You know, I proposed when we were 16 and she said no. She said, I think we need to get a bit older. So she was very wise then as well. But the reality was their family her dad, he didn't drive around flash cars, or flash is what we use for fancy, and that's the word we use in New Zealand, flash. But anyway, he had like a lot of old cars that he had fixed up, not antiques, just junkers that he had fixed and they would use. And then they were pretty decent when he got done with them. But he would use those to pick up people and take them to church. They lived out in the country, but they'd pick up a little kid from down the road or someone else in the little town, and he would use whatever he had for the Lord. And folks, you don't have to be rich. You don't have to have the nicest of everything. But God just wants you to use whatever you have for him so that you can lay up treasures in heaven by seeing people come to know the Lord and influencing them to then be able to teach others also. That's what laying up treasures in heaven is all about. And I would watch her dad, and yes, my wife saw me, a lady from church hit a deer, and I took the deer back to their place, and I skinned it out, and we got the meat and gave it away to people and everything. And I know some of you are probably above roadkill, but hey, you know, if it's fresh, what's the problem? Anyway, that's how we survived before the Lord called us to New Zealand as missionaries, when we were teaching and not making hardly any money. The Lord provided a number of things. If it was pretty flat, we didn't eat it, but if it was not too bad, we did. But we weren't proud about it. You know, it was, if God provided, we would take what God provided. But I saw her dad. He wasn't like a upfront sort of person. He was a guy that was in the background. And I would come over in the evening sometimes, and I'd look out to the barn, and I'd see flashing bright light, and it was Dad Hayward out there welding on the school bus that they use for picking up kids to take to church on Sunday, and the bus routes and stuff in our church. And other times I'd look out there and there's no bus, but I see him out there welding again, and it's welding the old metal chairs, the old folding metal chairs that would break. And he just quietly did all these different jobs, just faithfully serving the Lord. And you know, when he passed away, we were at his funeral, and a whole big group of his grandkids got up there and sang, "I saw Jesus in you." Because he was laying up treasures in heaven. And folks, we can live for the riches of this world, and they can be nice. And by the way, I don't consider air conditioning in this area as being rich. I consider it as being necessity. Especially if you have missionaries visiting. It is a necessity. But, you know, use whatever God has that he's given you, use it for him. Amen. And make a difference for Christ. As my wife said, sometimes we got discouraged in New Zealand. Sometimes things got a little bit hard. And when I was trying to help that church become self-supporting, that had been a bit of established church for a while, I had people come up with problems that had happened 10 years before I ever got there. And there were all sorts of issues that came up, and other people told me, look, leave and let them deal with their own problems. And I said, well, the reality is I can just run away from these problems, but I'll just find them some other ministry. They'll just pop their head up again. And I said, we need to deal with it biblically. And we need to sort out these issues and let people deal with them biblically. And so that's what we did. But the reality is we did that so we could see this lasting fruit. And folks, that's what the treasure is that we need to be building. Building people for Christ, witnessing to people, seeing people come to know the Lord as Savior, and that is the eternal treasure that we can build. And you know, if God gives you a nice home, use that home for God. Amen. If God gives you a nice car, use that car for God. If God gives you a 72-foot cabin cruiser boat, use that to take your pastor out. You know, just whatever. But use it for the Lord. And use everything that God gives you for him. You know, the Groves, they're very faithful people. Amen. And we'll miss them a lot. And it's really good how they would use their home for the Lord too. And they were a real blessing to us. And you know, that Bible training program we were talking about, at the beginning of the year, he had 4 young people from his church that were in that Bible training program. And that is really good. I mean,